Hello and welcome to Lunchtime Politics on Channels Television. I'm Millicent Walker. On the news this hour, Vice President Professor Yemi Osinbajo tells leaders that they must not allow the rhetoric of division to supersede the rhetoric of unity, asking for them to speak up against voices that may want to disunite the nation. And President Buhari is being advised to ensure he adds new hands into his cabinet for the second term. Plus, the race for the leadership of the 9th National Assembly heats up. Frontline candidate Honorable Femi Gbajabiamila is getting more of the heat, but still leaving no stone unturned. To the program. Let's kick off this news this hour with a charge from the Vice President, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, to leaders on the unity of Nigeria. In his message on the end of the Ramadan season, the Vice President said leaders need to demonstrate to Nigerians that Nigeria is a united country and that those who want to stoke up embers of division will not be allowed to do so. He then went further to ask all leaders to, quote, that we must not allow the rhetoric of division to supersede the rhetoric of unity. We must also speak up. We must speak in ways that unite our country. We cannot keep quiet because there are so many negative statements being made every day, and sometimes we ignore those statements and say these are people who have no understandings. But if we allow these negative statements to continue, then they will define our country, define the situation of our country. End of quote. Professor Osinbajo ended his message by saying that our country is destined for greatness, and those who want to hold us back, Lord God Almighty will prevent them from doing so. The President, Muhammadu Buhari, is also optimistic about the greatness of the country. His feelings were also expressed when he observed prayers to mark the end of Ramadan in Abuja. President Buhari was accompanied by the service chiefs, Inspector General of Police, and other top government officials. He later received residents of the Federal Capital Territory who paid Salah homage at the State House. Our correspondent Gloria Umezuke was there and reports.
Those who are interested in studying the political development of this country would have seen that I visited all the local governments in this country during that time, 774 local governments. And my first port of call, whichever local government I went, is to visit the community leader. And my appeal throughout was for understanding and support. I am very pleased Nigerians understand me. I thank you very much, those of you who suffered quietly supporting me, and I congratulate you for being happy that eventually I made it. And I assure you that I will continue to do my best in spite of the toughness of my neighbors. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Nigeria's President, Muhammadu Buhari. In the meantime, the president will have to inject fresh blood into his cabinet for the second term if he intends to aggressively drive the nation's economy, and also need to appoint those who truly believe in the fight against corruption. A former governorship candidate of the Labour Party in Kwara State, Comrade Issa Aremu, and a former chairman of the Federal Character Commission, Professor Shuaib Oba Abdulrahim, said this in an interview with journalists in Ilorin. The two men noted that the president needs key members who shared his agenda in the impending cabinet composition to deliver on the electioneering promises to the people, adding that he must do away with the old cabinet members. They also noted that though some of them might have performed credibly, the mood of the nation requires that fresh blood be injected into the Federal Executive Council for President Buhari's agenda to be realized.
The gains that have been made in the past 4 years, those gains that have been made in the areas of economy, as much as possible, the power sector reform must be seen to deliver uninterrupted power supply. Now, you need key ministers to drive this agenda, and that's why the president must think outside the box of his old cabinet. As good as some of them have performed, the mood of Nigerians is that we need new energy, new skills, new creativity, and that means you need new ones. And Nigeria is not short of good men and women who can drive the agenda for development.
President Buhari last week sent a delegation to the United Nations to help deliver Nigeria's permanent representative to the United Nations, Ambassador Tijani Mohamed Bande, as the President of the General Assembly, and that has happened. Ambassador Mohamed Bande emerged President of the 74th UN General Assembly. Now, Mr. Mohamed Bande, who was the sole candidate for the position, was elected at the 87th plenary meeting of the Assembly in New York yesterday. He is the second Nigerian to hold the office after retired military officer Joseph Garba, who held the position from 1989 to 1990. Ambassador Mohamed Bande will, in September, take over from Maria Espinosa Garces of Ecuador, who is the 73rd president of the UNGA. President Muhammadu Buhari appointed him as Nigeria's representative to the United Nations on the 31st of March 2018. Now, during her recent visit to Nigeria, Ms. Garces had hinted that Nigeria would be elected to the UNGA presidency. But what is the significance of that position to Nigeria? Its international clout or standings. What does the nation stand to gain from such positions? Well, let's ask those who know. Dr. Humphrey Ojiako, a former permanent representative to the United Nations, joins us from Abuja studios for more insight on this. We'd like to thank you for joining us at this time and ask, with Mr. Mohamed Bande as President-elect of UNGA, what is the significance, especially of Nigeria's role in the Committee of Nations?
Thank you for inviting me to comment on this. It's a positive thing that the Nigerian permanent representative to the United Nations in New York has been appointed by his peers to lead the UN General Assembly for this year, 2019 to 2020. It is an important position both for the ambassador himself and for the country. The only thing that needs to be corrected is the impression that this is such a huge, big deal for which Nigeria should declare public holiday. In fact, since yesterday, I've received calls from all sorts of quarters, people seeking to understand the implications. Some suggest that Nigeria is now taking over the United Nations, and I've tried to explain that no. The United Nations still has a Secretary General who is in charge of the global body. The President of UNGA, or the General Assembly, is a one-year appointment. He is chosen by his colleague permanent representatives to chair and preside over the proceedings of the 2019 General Assembly. And that is what it is. It doesn't go much beyond that.
We also understand that all members at the General Assembly are equal. But we'd like to ask, seeing that Mr. Mohamed Bande is the second Nigerian to hold office, and this is after Mr. Joseph Garba, a retired military officer back in the 80s, how much impact did we have back then, especially on the African continent, and what should we expect now?
In fact, yes, I think Major General Joseph Garba was the first Nigerian to hold that position in 1979 to 1980. The present Palm Rep, Bande is the second Nigerian to hold that position. The significance is the exposure it brings to him personally, the exposure it brings to Nigeria as a country. It does show us off in a body of over almost 200 countries. The person who presides over the proceedings, the sessions of the United Nations General Assembly meetings through this year and the part of next year would be a Nigerian citizen. If for nothing else, it gives us some moral, therapy if we're not having so many things to celebrate at the moment. That is something we could latch on and say, yes, the face of Nigeria is what the world sees when they tune into the United Nations proceedings.
So I'm going to ask.
Beyond that,
I'm going to ask two questions. Two questions in one, Ambassador.
Espinosa of Ecuador, who is the present president of the General Assembly, is handing over to a Nigerian. I don't think that many Nigerians who didn't know Ecuador before have now come to know everything about Ecuador because his citizen was the president of UNGA for the past year. So we have to temper our enthusiasm with a lot of common sense and reality.
A final question, and briefly, if you can answer, 2 in 1. Should Nigeria still crave a seat in the United Nations Security Council? Plus, looking at some of the things that Mr. Mohamed Banda has talked about, gender parity starting from his own office, and so many issues bedeviling the world, some of the global challenges in security, today's World Environment Day. Do you think that there can be genuine dialogue for effective resolution moving forward?
In fact, these are the issues the United Nations is confronted with at the moment. All those issues come under the agenda of the General Assembly. It is not control of the United Nations Security Council, which, by the way, Nigeria has led on various occasions. Nigeria has been a member of the Security Council on more occasions than I can recall immediately. But with UNGA, there's the General Assembly, the body that drafts the rules before things that are of global security and interest go to the Security Council. Nigeria is leading it for the second time. Those issues you mentioned, climate change, environment, security, national, international security issues, all this terrorism, they come under the agenda. We now have a Nigerian permanent representative in New York who will help to set this agenda. But his work, mostly, is off camera. What is on camera is the work he's going to do presiding over the sessions of the General Assembly between September and December this year. After that, most of the work he's going to be doing is the bureaucratic work that's off camera. So, by way of advantage to Nigeria, I've explained the visibility. It brings to us the attention it draws to Nigeria. We're not just a country who produces criminals and drug dealers and things. We produce world-class diplomats who can pilot the affairs of the world.
I'd like to thank you.
And that is something that is good for us.
Thank you so much.
For the other questions we are getting, the economics and the benefits and all of that, it is not that way. The world doesn't work in that manner. Yes, it could assist us to get visibility, but it is not going to do the work of internal administration.
We'd like to thank you, Dr. Humphrey Ojiako, former permanent representative to the United Nations, for joining us at this time. And the race for the leadership of the 9th National Assembly has taken a rather interesting dimension today. One of the frontline candidates for the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Honorable Femi Gbajabiamila, will be addressing the media this afternoon in Abuja. The campaign organization says it will like to clear the air about several issues which have been raised about the candidature of Mr. Femi Gbajabiamila. The campaign organization also says it will update members and supporters on how far they've gone in securing support that will enable Mr. Gbajabiamila win the race. The press conference is expected to air live on Channels Television by 2 p.m. Ibrahim Babangida throws weight behind President Muhammadu Buhari. Details after the break.